Robert Sugden may need to watch his back in Emmerdale when Cain discovers his involvement in Moira's time in prison, as the fallout is bound to be explosive. Moira spent a large part of the year locked up due to a shocking plot masterminded by Joe Tate, who forced Robert to hide several ID cards and passports at Butler's. The plan was designed to create further chaos for Moira and her farm, which was already struggling financially, with the ultimate goal of the Tates taking control of the land. Although Robert was deeply uncomfortable with what he did, Joe's blackmail, using a video of Victoria killing her dangerous brother in self-defense, left him feeling trapped with no way out. Moira's life quickly unraveled when the police discovered the documents on her property, linking her to a modern slavery operation led by Celia Daniels. The well-known farmer was arrested, imprisoned, and later charged not only with modern slavery crimes, but also with murder after the bodies of Celia and Anya were found on her land. Things became even worse when she had to sell her farm to the Tates in order to support her husband Cain, who had been diagnosed with cancer. Overcome with guilt after seeing the suffering he had caused, Robert decided to help the investigation, eventually uncovering evidence that weakened the case against Moira and led to her release. After returning to the village, Moira has found it difficult to adapt, especially as she no longer lives at Butler's. While Cain has helped set up a new farm for her with the Dingles, her true attachment remains with Butler's, leading her to secretly help Robert, who is now running the place she once called home. However, receiving Moira's support only increased Robert's guilt, prompting him to admit his part in what happened to her. Furious, Moira demands that he report himself to the police. Aaron, however, believes that revealing Robert's actions to Cain would be a terrible idea, especially with Cain's cancer surgery approaching. Despite being deeply hurt by Robert's betrayal, Moira eventually decides it's better to keep the truth hidden for now. Remembering that Joe was the main cause of her ordeal, she later confronts the situation by heading to Home Farm with a shotgun and revealing everything to Dawn Taylor about his deceit. Even so, staying silent about Robert's actions proves harder than Moira expected, and her stress continues to build as Cain's operation draws nearer. At the same time, Cain worries about how the surgery might affect their relationship, but Moira reassures him that they will face whatever comes together. The real question remains whether she can continue to keep Robert's secret hidden. In Emmerdale, secrets rarely stay buried, so even if she manages to stay quiet for now, it likely won't be long before everything is revealed. And when that day arrives, Robert certainly won't want to be around for the consequences. Emmerdale's Jacob is driven to the edge by the scheming Dr. Todd next week, finally finding the strength to move forward with a formal complaint against his controlling superior. However, the question remains whether anyone will take Jacob's side after Todd manipulates the situation to make him appear like the one at fault. Jacob makes a serious mistake when he follows Todd into the women's toilets at the Woolpack to confront her, falling straight into the trap she has carefully set. The situation begins to spiral after Todd tells Sarah that Jacob is eager to return to work despite them having a newborn, a claim that understandably angers him. Furious at the accusation, Jacob challenges Todd in the pub, but things quickly escalate when he follows her into the restroom. Although this decision is already questionable, it becomes even more damaging when Vanessa walks in and catches him there. Later on, Vanessa arrives at the shop and openly criticizes Jacob for what she sees as completely inappropriate behavior. Afterwards, Sarah demands answers from Jacob about Vanessa's accusations, prompting him to finally open up about the harassment he has been facing from Dr. Todd. Clearly emotional, Jacob struggles as he explains the stress and suffering he has endured at work because of Todd's actions. Fortunately, Sarah believes everything he says and promises to stand by him as he deals with the situation. Realizing how deeply Todd's manipulation has affected Jacob, Sarah also confronts Vanessa for trusting Todd's version of events. At the same time, Jacob attends another meeting with HR to discuss filing an official complaint against his boss. To his shock, he learns that Todd has already filed a complaint first, turning the tables on him. HR reveals that Todd has gathered a large amount of evidence against Jacob, including recorded conversations intended to incriminate him. This revelation leaves Jacob devastated, convinced that he stands no chance of proving his innocence. Feeling completely overwhelmed, he later explains the situation to Sarah, including the damaging evidence Todd has collected. Despite the setback, Sarah refuses to give up and urges Jacob to keep fighting, not just for his career, but also in memory of his late mother. Motivated by her support, Jacob heads to Tuggill to confront Dr. Todd directly. Now the question is whether Jacob can finally put an end to Todd's hold over him, or if his attempt to fight back will only make things worse. Emmerdale's Bear begins to unravel as the outcome of his trial draws near. Bear's future is uncertain as the court hearing finally arrives. He killed an abusive drug dealer after catching him in the act of attacking his son, while Paddy and Dylan later helped him hide the truth and mislead the police. Following intense pressure and a determined investigation led by D.S. Walsh, Bear eventually broke down and confessed, with Paddy soon admitting his own involvement as well. Now all three men are set to face court, and their situation appears increasingly bleak. Bear's admission, along with his past displays of anger, paints a damaging picture that works against him. On top of that, financial evidence linked to accounts set up in his name makes it seem as though he was directly involved, further strengthening the case against him. Meanwhile, Paddy and Dylan must also stand trial for attempting to obstruct justice, putting their futures at risk. By the end of the proceedings, the village could lose 3 of its residents. As the trial begins, Bear is forced to confront the painful events he has endured over the past year. The actor, who portrays Bear, explained that the character has already resigned himself to the possibility of spending the rest of his life behind bars. He believes Bear feels undeserving of freedom, burdened by guilt, and convinced that prison is the consequence he must accept for taking a life. With no hope for a positive outcome, Bear enters the courtroom expecting to face the full weight of punishment. At the same time, April takes the witness stand, clearly overwhelmed with nerves as she faces an intense and unforgiving prosecution. Dylan later gives evidence in an attempt to defend Bear, explaining how he acted to protect others, but he is subjected to equally tough questioning. April becomes increasingly shaken, fearing that her testimony may have caused more harm than good. Simo is called next, but his presence only worsens Bear's fragile state, pushing him deeper into despair. As the case unfolds, it becomes clear that the situation is even more serious than initially thought. During a break in proceedings, Zara reveals just how dire things are, leaving the defense with no option but to have Bear testify himself. This decision could prove extremely risky and potentially seal his fate. The following day, the family returns to court, waiting anxiously to see how the case will develop once Bear takes the stand. His counsellor begins with a strong statement, highlighting his vulnerability and the way he had been manipulated. Although Bear prepares to speak in his own defense, there is still doubt over whether he can truly help his situation. He is ultimately required to give evidence, despite being in a deeply fragile mental state, making the moment even more challenging. Emmerdale is broadcast on weekday evenings at 8 p.m. on ITV1, and episodes are also available to stream from 7 a.m. on ITVX and YouTube.